My name is Barrett Slegamilk. I'm joined here today by Stephen Link and Ariel Ekblah. We're all current graduate students at MIT and leaders of space-focused organizations at the Institute. Today, we're going to be telling you a little bit about some of the growing interest in the private space industry from the nation's leading business and engineering schools, as well as give you a preview of some new technologies that are being developed at the Institute, which you are welcome to come and get a hands-on look at during the break. So, for me, as I'm sure is the same for many of you out there, my interest in and passion for space started from a very young age. I grew up in a small town on the big island of Hawaii called Hilo, and I remember being able to look up at the night sky and see the Milky Way as clearly as you could see clouds during the daytime. I developed a passion for astronomy and the dream of one day becoming an astronaut, which I took with me into the Navy, where I served for 5 years as a nuclear submarine officer. A vocation that I chose in part because of some of the parallels that I saw behind operating a submarine and operating a spacecraft. I then went on to MIT and with the purpose of developing more of the business and engineering skills to go and make an impact in the private space industry. Now, as I've learned, neither my passion nor my timing are unique. There's a huge amount of growth going on in the industry right now, and schools are taking notice. At MIT, we have the Astropreneurships and Space Industry Club, which Stephen Link and I are co-presidents of, a club that has grown to over 140 active members, ranging from professional MBA students to faculty and staff at the Institute. We also have the Media Lab Space Initiative, which Ariel Ekblah is going to be telling you a little bit more about in a few minutes here. Now, one might argue that the interest that MIT is showing in the space industry is a result of its intimate connection with the space program from the Apollo era to the fact that it has produced more astronauts than any non-military institution. However, we're seeing the same trend across the country. From the Tepper School of Business at the Carnegie Mellon University to the University of Chicago's Booth School to Harvard Business School, all these institutions have developed their own space-focused organizations in the last few years, and all of them have been very popular. Incidentally, those three schools that I mentioned have leadership here present tonight. Now, one of the most interesting drivers, I think, of this passion for the space industry at MIT is the ease of entrepreneurship and the commercialization of new technologies from the labs there. Every year, several companies are spun out of the Institute looking to commercialize new technologies being developed. And one of the most interesting new fields that is being pushed there is the field of space-based laser communications, which Stephen Link is going to tell you a little bit more about. Steve?
Thank you. As Barrett mentioned, there's a tremendous amount of excitement across multiple disciplines regarding the commercial space industry. And when you combine this with reduced regulation, with reduced costs, you develop this really unique ecosystem, this mini renaissance, if you will, at the risk of sounding overly dramatic, that allows the astropreneur, the entrepreneur, to really create the next big thing. At MIT, we've seen advances, critical developments in satellite propulsion, in high reliability electronics, using innovative shielding methods and radiation mitigation algorithms. And my personal favorite, laser communications. Like Barrett, I have a Navy background. I spent 5 years as a special operations officer because I wanted a challenging role that was also high impact. And if you're looking at for a challenging environment, space is a great place to start. Now, my heroes were the polar explorers. And yes, we hear the Antarctic analogies all the time, but it doesn't make them any less important or any less true. Because they're my heroes because they're undaunted by extreme challenges in the name of discovery. But also because they had the foresight to bring with them the scientists, the geologists, the astronomers, because they knew all of their efforts would be for naught if they weren't able to communicate this information back home. So back then, they were bringing the scientists to the data. At this point, we need to bring the data to the scientist, to the entrepreneur. Beyond exploration, because this is the business case to dream, I like to highlight the remote sensing market, a multi-billion-dollar industry, multi-disciplines with insurance, finance, precision agriculture, and a multitude of others. And to make competitive business decisions and have the best business intelligence, they rely on a lot of data from space, from satellite imagery. But the data is not coming down fast enough, and they're not getting enough of it. And that's because of technological limitations. I like to use the NASA analogy of trying to download your favorite movie from the moon using a radio frequency, S-band. This would take about a month to accomplish. Using laser communications, this can be done in a matter of minutes. So what does the current solution look like today? Well, at MIT, we think we have a pretty good idea. And it's called the Nanosatellite Optical Downlink Experiment. And it was done through the Satellite Telecommunications, Astronomy, and Radiation Lab at MIT. And it uses IR to send signals from space. And this is really important, because channel capacity scales with wavelength. So if we can send signals at a higher frequency, we can get a lot more data, a lot faster, using a lot less power. And that's important when operating, say, within a CubeSat, a satellite about this big. In fact, this technology is only a 10-centimeter cube. And it's done with all commercial off-the-shelf components, which is really tremendous. Using IR, you have a smaller beam width, which makes it inherently secure, and you don't have to deal with the same licensing that other RF spectrums operators need to use. In combination with this, we have a portable ground station. It looks like an amateur telescope, about a 30-centimeter aperture with a star tracker. Another advantage of using IR is you don't need these giant 25-meter dishes. The ground station tracks the satellite, and it receives the information so we can take action here on Earth. But getting information down from Earth, or down from orbit, is not the only aspect. We also use this technology for relays, for cross-linking. And you can imagine non-static objects moving at extraordinary speeds. It's a very difficult problem, but one we think we can apply this technology to as well. I've got a 3D mock-up of the technology in a CubeSat, 3D printed one. I had a heck of a time getting it through TSA, so please stop by to check it out after this. But now I'm going to hand it over to Ariel to discuss the latest and greatest from the MIT Media Lab. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, everyone. Nice to be here today. Thank you very much to The Economist for having us. I'm coming to you from the MIT Media Lab. I'm the founder and lead of the new space exploration initiative there. We're about a year old. For anyone who's not familiar with the Media Lab, it is an interdisciplinary R&D environment, corporate funded by 80 member companies within the auspices of MIT. The labs range from synthetic neurobiology to my personal lab, which is aerospace structures, electrical engineering and design, to art and architecture, robotics and AI, so a very broad spectrum. The Space Initiative is meant to be an umbrella structure over all of these labs, supporting any researcher, PI, student, staff, or faculty who want to deploy some of their research into space. So this is where we're starting to see, as was mentioned before, not just the rocket technology that we need to get ourselves up there, but all of the other dimensions to life in space, the future of consumer technologies in space that will delight and empower humanity now that we're at this incredible cusp of interplanetary civilization. So the first thing I'll do is take you through our 3 core mission areas, and then I will give you a sneak peek of 3 current projects that we're working on at the lab. So our first goal is to democratize access to space exploration technology. Coming from the MIT culture, another way that we say this is space hacking. The idea here is that with the dropping costs of CubeSats, of launches, and even the materials that we think of being space hardy and space tolerant, we're able to, for the first time, bring space exploration technology to a much broader swath of the global population. We're thinking about this in 2 ways. One is that we keep our work as open as we can. So we avoid ITAR, export control to the extent that we can, and we open source a lot of our technology and our design so that we can be a vanguard and others can follow our iterative and innovative space technologies. The second is we love to get back to this sensation that children had in the Apollo era. Obviously, I was not there, but I've heard of this, that you would look up in the stars after the Apollo missions and think, in my lifetime, I can go there, I can participate. I think we're at that cusp again, and what we're doing with the Media Lab Space Initiative is bringing this democratization of space technology to even younger audiences. So we'll be launching a rather large CubeSat co-building program with middle schools and high schools through MIT Lincoln Laboratory to support NASA's 50 CubeSats, 50 States program, as one example of how we're bringing this technology out and further. Another key area of focus for us, and something that we think of as a mission principle, is revolutionizing the future of exploration while also profoundly benefiting life on Earth. At the Media Lab, we're very fortunate to be corporate funded with discretionary funds, which means they don't tell us what to work on. This gives us the flexibility to do the riskier, more futuristic space projects and prototypes than what might have otherwise been possible through traditional academic or government funding. The lab also moves on a very rapid, iterative 6-month timescale. Because of these corporate companies that fund us, we're able to have an idea to prototype stage and to just pre-deployment in 6 months, and we do it every 6 months. So there's a certain speed here that we think we will really bring to revolutionize the future of exploration. The types of projects that we do are probably familiar to some of you under the tech demo mission category if you're coming from, say, the JPL or NASA background. And then the second half of this sentence, to make sure that even while we're focusing on this sci-fi future that the Media Lab does so well, making sure that we come back and all of the work that we do has a cognizance of benefiting life on Earth. This is something that Maria Zuber, Vice President of Research at MIT, encourages us to think about, that the future of space exploration is not about abandoning the Earth or escaping the Earth. It's about making a better future for humanity on Earth and beyond. And so we're really committed to that. And finally, this is the Media Lab, uniting engineers, scientists, artists, and designers. This is something that's unique about the lab student culture for a really rich and fuller vision of what a sci-fi space future could be. To this point, we will be deploying 16 research payloads next week. I really should be back at the lab finishing our prototypes down in Sanford, Florida on a parabolic flight. And then 6 payloads with a suborbital launch platform in the summer of 2018. And we are already in talks with NanoRacks to get up to the International Space Station at the end of the year. So we're really looking forward to deploying our first vanguard of projects. This is our team, for anyone who's curious. So I'm here to talk to you as the founder and lead, but we are incredibly fortunate to have Joey Ito, who's the director of the Media Lab, and Dr. Maria T. Zuber, who's the vice president for research at MIT, advising us. With Maria Zuber's perspective over all research at MIT, the space initiative is now growing beyond the bounds of the Media Lab, and we're really fortunate to have emergent partnerships with MIT AeroAstro, MIT Sloan, MIT Lincoln Lab, MIT EAPS, Earth and Planetary Sciences as well. The next face you see is Joe Paradiso. He's our faculty mentor at the Media Lab. He's an aerospace man himself for many years, worked at Draper. Carrie Cahoy is our faculty mentor at AeroAstro, a large and growing name in the small sats business, and we're really inspired by her on a daily basis. And Shen Liu, who is our arts and outreach coordinator. This slide represents the over 50 now students, staff, and faculty who work with us for the Space Initiative at MIT. All right, 30 seconds, maybe a little bit more on each project to give you a sense of what we're up to. These are tardigrades. Many of you are probably familiar with these incredible creatures by now. They are incredibly resilient to temperature swings. They can survive in a vacuum. They can survive extremes of desiccation and radiation. We're looking at this property called cryptobiosis that allows them to be so resilient. And one of the labs at the Media Lab that's actually behind CRISPR and Cas9 and gene drives, if any of you guys have been following that patent battle, is taking and looking at how you can extract this property of cryptobiosis and reverse engineer it in other organisms to make other organisms more space hardy. The idea here is to flip the paradigm, right? So for every other organism from Earth that we've ever wanted to send out into space, we try to encase it in an Earth bubble to keep it alive, atmospheric bubble, the right temperature, the right humidity. Can we instead make organisms, maybe someday our humans ourselves, more space tolerant to begin with? Second project is self-assembling space architecture. Looking out to a now relatively near future of space tourism in orbit around the Earth, we need a new model for architecture. The International Space Station is venerable, and it's actually an honor to be here with Robin this morning. But we are thinking that to be able to scale to the hundreds or thousands of humans in orbit, we need a model that doesn't rely on the complexity of assembly and, say, astronaut EVAs to get something assembled. So we're looking at stochastic self-assembling architecture. This means no guidance, no nav, no robotics, no propulsion. The logic for the ultimate structure is built into the constituent tiles themselves. They passively come together and self-assemble through the force of electromagnets that you can turn on and off, which means it's also reconfigurable, so you can pop a tile out, pop a whole module out, bring it back in. We're interested in natively embedding sensor networks into the materials of the tiles themselves. So instead of sensor networks and life support systems being kind of ad hoc add-ons to architecture after the fact, we're going to be embedding these systems natively in the material of the structure itself. Third project, third glimpse, is BlockSat. So the Media Lab has now established a domain expertise in Bitcoin and blockchain, having employed some of the key Bitcoin developers. We're interested in a new paradigm for satellite constellation use. Instead of satellites being purpose-built, owned by a big company, or even a single constellation owned by a single entity like OneWeb or SpaceX, we're considering satellite constellations to be a new opportunity, somewhat like cloud computing, where you can rent time, you being a broad swath of the population, can rent time on a satellite constellation. So here we're looking at blockchains. I will say, having worked extensively in blockchains, we're trying to avoid that fad term, so maybe perhaps more technically a distributed ledger technology to mediate the auction for a cloud computing-like rentable constellation algorithm. And then on top of the auctioneering, basically, that allows anybody to submit a task mediated by the blockchain, we'll have a layer of machine learning smart orchestration to make sure that the tasks that are submitted to the satellites are batched most effectively and are also going to be safe for the execution on the satellites. If you're interested in any of these projects, come talk to me after the talk. We'll be at a demo table in the back of the room, I believe. And just as a final note, we have an invite-only event that we now host every year at the Media Lab called Beyond the Cradle. Last year, we were honored to have leaders from SpaceX, Blue Origin, Made in Space, Astronaut Corps, NASA, ESA, India's SRO, and sci-fi writers from Hollywood, VFX folks from Hollywood, to come together and think about how we can prototype and build a sci-fi future. So if this is of interest to you, or if you'd like to see the fantastic hardware that Barrett and Stephen have brought today, come visit us at the back booth. Thank you so much.